Hey guys, Ty here, taking a quick break at the property today. Needed a breather. It's funny how life stress and just unknowns can really kind of drain a body. And the much needed breather today that God gave me by being out here, checking on a lot of stuff, switching camera cards and such. Didn't really have a bunch of big stuff planned or that needed done, but just gave me a little bit of a breather. And one of the things I wanted to maybe put forth was a quick whitetail minutes and discuss the things that I believe we as hunters or land managers, better yet, land managers, fail to realize is a mistake that we're making. These are some of the things, and going into this discussion, I have a few ideas, and we're just going to let it organically happen. But there are some things that I believe we need to recognize are mistakes as land managers, and I wanted to put those forth in kind of a consolidated pinpoint video that you're watching right now. So a little less chat and a little more action. So let's get into the first thing. The first mistake that I think a lot of guys make is not thinking things through. Myself have really committed it twice to varying degrees. And what I mean by not thinking things through is acting abruptly or spur of the moment type decisions that may impact your future, the property's future, the habitat's future. Pops and I learned this when we were very young in this. I mean, brand new, newborn babies in the habitat world. And we just knew that canopy was bad and we needed to get growth going. The homestead property was void of cover. It was like a park. And we needed understory, we needed growth, we needed cover. So we went in, we just started hacking. We just started annihilating the woods. And it turned into a mess, and deer started using it, but they couldn't utilize it to its fullest potential because we didn't know anything about hinge cutting, we didn't know to leave arteries, we didn't carve out spaces, we just made a tornado zone in essence, and then we had to go back and actually end up chainsawing a bunch of it. So that was to a big extreme extent. To a smaller extent, I thought through what I wanted to brush hog here and clear for food plots and location area openings and such, but I overdid it. And I think I fell victim to the sexiness of food plots, if you will. And now I'm actually reverting some of those spots into bedding options. Found an amazingly big bed today in one of them that I'm reclaiming to a bedding option, so that's awesome. That's the first thing. You got to stop and think things through. Don't think just 1 year out or that year. Think 4 or 5 years out, and that's going to pay off huge for you. The second biggest mistake that I think a lot of land managers make is one that I know you guys have all heard me harp on, and that's the love infatuation with mature timber, mature trees. There's a time and place for it, and there are certain creatures, there are certain animals that mature timber does benefit. But there are very few animals that solely depend on mature, closed canopy woods. Deer don't thrive in them. Quail don't thrive in them. Turkeys will roost in them, but they don't thrive in them. They can't live in large, huge chunks of where there's no food, essentially. There's not a lush amount of food. The density levels will plummet just like deer when you get into those situations. And I don't know how many times I've had to try to communicate and convince landowners that, if you want deer, you want your property to be the best it can be for deer, or even turkeys, or really anything in general, you got to start opening up that canopy. You got to get early successional growth happening. You got to get that explosion of the dormant seed bed that's underneath there just waiting to burst forth. So many animals thrive and live in understory and in growth that if you don't have it, the deer aren't going to thrive. I've said it before, the deer live between the soles of our feet and basically our armpits. If you're an average heighted man, That's kind of the sweet spot. Anything over that, it's really tough for the deer to get to. Anything under that is obviously underground, but that's where they thrive, that's where they live. So that's the second thing. You got to stop having a love infatuation with mature timber. Number 3 is a spinoff of number 2. Let's take it a step further and talk about something that I've gotten ridiculed for in the past, and that's oaks are not the holy grail. They are amazing timber. They are a great food source during a certain small time of the year, and the deer will seek them out. But when you have a mature closed canopy woodlot, if it's all oak trees, consider yourself extremely lucky, because what you're going to be able to do is go in there and log 70 to 80% of them if they're that big, get a bunch of timber value. You can put it back into strategically planting oaks and other trees as well, and you left some really awesome mature oak trees now that the canopy is open, they can spread their wings, they can spread their branches out, they are not restricted. And you'd be shocked at studies that have shown how a released timber or a released canopy of an oak tree that doesn't have to compete with other trees, maybe oaks, maybe not, the second you release them, the better and more healthier that tree is, and able to photosynthesize more, have more branches, more foliage, and it will actually produce a higher number of nuts. So that's something to keep in mind. And obviously I love white oaks more than I love red oaks just because of their tannin levels, but each one plays a role. And if I have limited numbers of oaks, I'm gonna protect the oaks more. But if I've got a lot of oak trees, I toured a property this year that I swear that place on like 30 acres of woods had probably near 100 or 200 oak trees. I mean, it was incredible. I've never seen that many oak trees. And it probably had 60 to 80 huge white oaks, like mature, beyond even loggable size. It was nuts. So get them down, and they make awesome hinge cut trees, especially young oaks. If they're not in the location that you want, or they're growing in the understory of other oak trees and you know you don't want them to be there, hinge those puppies over, man. It's a great food source for the deer. They love browsing fresh oaks, and they live. They live. I've had great success with hinging oak trees. Number 4. The fourth mistake that I think a lot of land managers make is falling, like I kind of hinted at earlier, and that's the sexiness of food plots. The moment you begin to realize and read studies and recognize the amount of food that a deer consumes that's not on your food plots, it'll begin to make sense why I say don't fall for the sexiness of food plots. They are great. They're a great tool. And I mentioned it on a video a while back. I wonder how many people out there have put in a food plot, went to the extent of providing a food source, and then not put a stand on it and not hunt it. It's truly a food source, a sanctuary food source, if you will. I have a few of those. I have some clover spots. I have portions of my property I will not hunt, even though they have food sources on it. And I say all that because I think food plots are the lazy man's way of attempting to steer deer. It literally does not impact deer nearly as much as sculpting the habitat through hinge cuts, through opening canopy, through disturbing soil, allowing the native forbs and browses to grow is going to make a larger impact on the deer, and done right will steer the deer better than anything that you can plant. We've all fallen victim. Now, don't get me wrong, there are times of the year where an awesome food source is going to do incredible things, but if all you do is focus on food plot development and not the habitat around it, you're not creating security. You're merely creating a great food source. I want my place to have amazing deer dense habitat to where they feel safe and they can thrive, and when they step out into a food plot, it's basically just an extension of the habitat. It may not always be the easiest to hunt, but that's fine. I want them to live, and all I need is one chance. So don't fall victim to just food plots. Think outside the box. Think outside of that as well. And that actually ties in to the fifth mistake, and that is, I think, getting so one species centric. I fall victim to it myself. Now granted, all of my decisions will always be governed at the top. If I'm weighting on a scale what a decision will impact, if it impacts the deer greatly, I'm probably going to do it. But a good example of this is maybe consider putting in pollination strips, wildflower strips. They don't have to be huge, but they can be a huge impact on your, just the overall conservation impact to the habitat and the creatures that call your place home. I think encouraging pollinators is an incredibly lost thing in this world, and if we're not careful, just you want to get scared, read up on the studies about bees, honeybees, pollinators and that, and how if they die off, there's going to be hell to pay, for lack of a better term. So I'm actually going to be attempting to plant more non-tree specific or deer specific trees that bloom. I got some cherry trees back here that I planted. I'm going to try to bring in some more stuff that encourages pollination and such. But then another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to attempt to get some wildflower strips going, some pollination strips, to where butterflies and bees and all those things will be in there, and it'll be just another extension of my pollination on my property. I'd really love to get a beekeeper in the area that wants another location to come in here and do it. I would even be willing to do like a 1/4 acre or 1/2 acre of buckwheat, or allow clover to go to seed and bloom. But that's another thing. I think that's another mistake that a lot of land managers make, is we get so one species centric. And while you'll always hear me give deer tips, because this is a deer-centered production and video, it's not the sole purpose why we're out there. So I think in general, the more you do this, the deeper you get into conservation and the deeper that calling becomes on your heart. So I think I'll stop there. Those are just 5 really good, there's more that we could discuss, but those are 5 mistakes that I think land managers make. And maybe I'll make one of the 5 mistakes I feel hunters make. But I think that's all I got for you guys right now. Hopefully you've enjoyed this Whitetail Minutes, and hopefully it gives you something to ponder, gives you something to think about, and challenges your way of thinking, because the more you challenge the way you think, the more questions you ask, the more answers you get, and I believe the more successful you will become. This is Ty. God bless, and good luck out there.